Good morning, Ohana. Let's continue in prayer, and then we'll go into our study. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today, and thank you for this time to be in your house, Lord. And I just thank you that, again, we get to have this privilege to be here together to worship you, and that you will allow us into your presence. And I just pray that this morning, as we continue in our worship through studying of your word, that you will continue to bless us and learn what it is you have for us from your word today. And I pray that everything we do brings you honor and glory. And in your name I pray, amen. So in 2018, there was this tiny little movie that came out called Avengers Infinity War. Yeah, it's just this tiny little movie. This movie had like 12 years of buildup of all these movies that came before it. So this is one of those movies that end up being like an event. Like this is a big event thing. And so as it was coming up, me being a youth minister at the time, I was like, let's take some youth and some people to go watch this thing because it'll be fun, just do it together. And then I had this idea where I said, you know what? We need to see this on the biggest screen possible. And so growing up when St. Augustine in the World Golf Village, they have an IMAX screen. And I mean a legit IMAX screen, not this cute little thing that Regal has and the Grand has. Those are adorable. But this dwarfs that. And so I'm like, man, what's the closest one? And the closest one I knew to us was in Atlanta. And I wanted to go here, and I'm like, you guys have got to come. And so I start promoting it, and of course I get people asking me questions, parents mostly. You're going to drive 5 hours to watch a movie? I was like, but you don't understand. This is one of the movies in one of the biggest screens. They're like, how big can it be? And I start to explain to them, and I'll explain to you. A legitimate IMAX screen. When you walk into the theater, you walk through this tunnel. And when you walk out of the tunnel, you come out, you're at the floor, and then this screen is like 5 or 6 stories tall. And then it's massively wide. I don't know how wide it is. To get to your seats, you walk out of this tunnel, you take a left, and you have to go up a big flight of stairs. And then you come to your seat. So it's one of those things like if you have to go to the bathroom, get it all out beforehand because it's going to be really annoying to walk through all the people, go down the stairs, go up the tunnel, right? But I'm like, we have got to see this on the biggest thing. So I promote this, and I have a group of guys, and there should be a picture coming up here of the group of guys that we went with. We had a fun time. We went to Atlanta. You may look at this if you can see it well. I feel like half of our congregation is in this picture. There is a beardless Caleb up there, so if you want to know what he looks like without a beard. And then you see me with my glorious mane that I used to have. I loved it. I love that hair, but Katie told me I'm not allowed to do that anymore because I got more compliments than she did on my hair, and she did not appreciate that. But there's a group that we got together, and a couple of them skipped class for this. Proud of you. Skipped class, and we went, and yes, we went down to Atlanta. We had a great time. We watched this movie. I even filmed them like entering, and they're all like, this is huge. And afterwards, it was just this great experience because with the speakers and everything, like it was just really, really an immersive experience, and it was great. But so many people were just like, why would you do this? They didn't understand the point, and they're like, you got to understand, like this is exciting. This is this moment, and they just couldn't get it because they just didn't experience it. They didn't know what was the big deal. But it's something that we did. So we drove 5 hours, we watched it, stayed the night in a hotel, and came back home. It was a great time. And you can ask those boys in the back. I know they like to hide back there in the tech, but you can talk to them and be like, how was it, gentlemen? How was it? And as we continue in our study in the Gospel of John, we're going to see this story that usually gets referenced when most people just want to make a joke. Now, I will say a lot of times those jokes are hilarious, and I appreciate them. And for instance, here's this meme up here. I'm going to show you all this. If everyone asks you what would Jesus do, remind them that flipping tables and whipping things is within the realm of possibilities. So I've always appreciated, this meme. I'm like, yeah, that's true. What would Jesus do? He'd get wild. That's what he would do, right? And then, or if you can take this out of context a little bit, Jesus flipping over tables. Here's another one that'll pop up here. This one says when you ask AI to make me a picture of Jesus flipping over tables. Right? So people just have fun with this story. This is fun, and this is just something that people do, and then you have this out there, but this is normally what it is, and a lot of times it is. It makes for a great joke. It makes for some fun to talk about Jesus, talk about scriptures. But as we continue today, obviously we're going to dig into this more. We're going to see John's thought process about this story and where it lands and how it connects with what came before it with the miracle at Cana. And so we're going to see that this is another one of those stories where, yes, it has real-world application, but it also points to Jesus' ultimate work on the cross. So we're going to go ahead and get into it in John chapter 2, starting in verse 13. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. So one thing that we need to set the stage and kind of understand what's happening here is back then, especially for Passover, but they had this whole temple system that was set up. And because Passover was this time, it was considered a pilgrimage for a lot of people. They would come from different areas, different parts of the country, sometimes different currencies. So they would come and they have to make this pilgrimage so they can sacrifice once a year. And so when they would come, they couldn't bring all the animals with them, so they would be selling animals for the sacrifice. They had different type of currency. They could come and exchange the currency so they can pay their temple tax. And this is a normal custom that happens so everybody can come and participate in Passover in worship. And so this is what is going on, and so they would be set up, and they would be set up in this story, and the part of the temple is called the court of Gentiles. So just within the temple walls, and this is where the Gentiles could meet, and this is where all this was set up. And so this is what was happening at the time. They were just doing these things to be able to partake and do that, partake in Passover. So as we continue on here, in verse 15, it says, "And he made a scourge of cords, and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out their coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he said to those who were selling doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business." And so this is where we need to have a little bit of understanding, because there is some confusion here. Because if this is the normal practice of the day, if this is what they did normally so people can partake in Passover, the question comes up, why would Jesus be so mad? Like, why is he upset and flipping tables and driving out the animals? Like this, why is this a problem? Well, the first problem here is that this whole orchestrated thing with the animals and the money changers actually used to take place outside of the temple. So as people were coming to the temple outside, there was the market area, and this is where all these things would take place. Well, over time, that's where it's supposed to be, but they took it and they moved it inside the court of the Gentiles. Now, this area of the temple is the only place Gentiles can be. They can't go any further for any kind of worship. So any kind of worship or traditions or anything the Gentiles were going to do, they had to do it in this area. So now they set up the market in this whole area, and just imagine, like, if this is where you're coming and you're trying to worship and you're trying to partake of Passover, and all you're hearing is, yeah, I got $5 for the sheep. Oh yeah, I need this change in currency. And you have all these things going on, when now you got Gentiles who can't even worship because they're totally distracted by what's going on. And so this is something that ends up being a problem, because now there was this barrier for people to be able to worship God. And then another barrier that was put there was the fact that these guys were overcharging for the animals. And when they were exchanging money, they would exchange it at a rate where they made profit, so people didn't get as much money back. And so their exchange rate was astronomical. So now there are people who can't buy the proper animals or can't get the proper amount back so they can pay the temple tax. And so now there's another hindrance for these people to worship. And basically what they did is they traded worship for profit. So these are all the things that is wrong with this picture. I mean, just imagine, like, this took place at Passover. Imagine if we, at Easter, right, our big once-a-year Sunday, if we at Easter were saying, okay, to enter our building, we're selling tickets. $10 a person. And then when they walk in, it's like, okay, well, to be able to worship with us, you got to wear this T-shirt, which is another $20. And then if you want to partake with communion, that's $5 a person. Like, just imagine, like, some of you are already like, that sounds really, really stupid. It is. But that's what they were doing. It would be like if we did stuff like that. And of course, if we did that, then we're thinking, well, we're forgetting why we exist as a church, right? Like, we exist to worship God, to fellowship with other believers as we worship God. And we're here to try to reach those who are far from God. But if we did these kinds of things, then we're letting tons of things come in between people and God. And this is something that it is our job, and it was their job back then to make sure that there were as little barriers as possible, as few as possible, for people to come to God and worship Him. And this is something that they missed. And it could be something that maybe we even miss a lot of times today. Because there are a lot of things that we may do that may hinder people from worship or wanting to come here. And there's the things that we got to keep thinking about. Now, this doesn't mean that we go soft. All right, this doesn't mean that we stop preaching sin. Like, we still preach sin. We preach whatever sin we preach. We say that is sin. We still call it out. We preach the need for repentance and transformation. We don't compromise on biblical truth. We don't do that, because if we take that away, then we're missing a good chunk of the gospel. We still have to preach these things, and if people choose not to come because they don't want to hear the truth, that's on them. That's not on us. But we must continue to preach truth. And so as a church, like we must hold tightly to truth, but probably hold a lot more loosely to our preferences. Because a lot of times what gets in the way of people worshiping God is our preferences. When you hear people's story about why they don't believe in God or why they don't want to come to church, they usually tell you things that are about preferences that happened in a church. Whether it was they wore the wrong clothes, or they forced a certain type of worship, or they did, I've heard this one, and this astounds me, but they didn't end the service until they had so much money in the offering plate. Like, I've literally heard someone tell me that before. It was crazy. But these are the types of things that can get in the way. And this happens because as humans, we start to either want to compromise truth or have these different things that happen because we're, in a sense, seeking for profit, whether it's numbers or finances or status as a church. And so these things can get in the way. And one thing that we need to remember and realize is why are we here, right? Like, are we here for the worship of God, or are we here to get something, right? And then this next part that we already read is really one of my favorite parts of this story. And this is me as Efren, yes, I'm reading a little bit into this, but I'm also seeing what Jesus did. It says that he made a scourge of cords, right? Some translation says he braided it. And for this cord, this whip that he made, there would be some braiding. Now, I don't know if any of you, I'm sure the ladies in here, you know how to braid. You guys do it pretty quickly. Us guys, I have 3 daughters. I had to learn to braid. Takes me a little bit. So I just had this moment where I'm just thinking, when Jesus is over here, he sees everything. And he comes in, he's like, oh no, here we go. He just starts braiding. He's like, oh, wait till I'm done braiding. Oh, all y'all gonna get it. Hold on, I'm almost there. I just feel like he's just getting ready, right? He's just getting ready as he's braiding this thing. He takes his time to braid this scourge of cords. And this is where, again, it's kind of funny, but it's just like you see Jesus do this, which shows us this isn't just what most people think, where he comes in, sees it, and just blind rage, he just picks something up and Jesus took time to make this thing. And so it shows that his intentions he was very intentional and very deliberate with what he did. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jesus thought through about his response before he took action. And yes, Jesus was mad. He was very mad, but as other scriptures say, in his anger, he did not sin. And because his whip that he made, this whip is made to herd animals. And we saw that, he took that to drive the animals out of these temple courts. And then he comes over and he starts flipping the tables of the money changers. Now, it is assumed that he didn't hurt anybody, because they just think, okay, normal people, we don't see it in scripture, but normal people, if you see a guy with a whip yelling, stop making this place, my house of the Lord, a house of business, and he's whipping and animals are running and tables are flipping, they assume that people will be like, well, we got to get out of here. There's some crazy man. What's going on? And so he drives everybody out because it's just the shock and awe of what is happening. What is this guy doing? And what Jesus did really was outrageous, because this is a system A religious system that was built into this and has been here for years, and this guy comes in and does this? How dare this man come in here and do this? We've established this, and he's going to come and wreck it all? Who does he think he is coming in here and tearing down our customs and our programs? We've worked hard to set all this stuff up. People know what to expect, and this is how they can have the best experience worshiping God. Who does this guy think he is? Which, of course, makes me think, would Jesus see God-honoring worship in our church, or would he want to tear down what we've built? It just makes me question. Even here, would Jesus see this as God-honoring what we do every Sunday? Or would he come in and be like, some stuff's got to go? It's a question that I have to ask myself. We all have to consistently ask, because the truth is we're all human. And it's very easy to fall into the traps of Satan, where he has a lot of great lies. But one of the big lies and big tricks, it's convincing us that all of our practices are Christian and God-honoring, when in reality they could be blasphemous. They could just be self-gratifying. Or they could be barriers that are stopping people from actually coming to God. And this is where we see a little bit of the connection from last week, and this is why John has this story here at this time, because just like last week, there are these old religious vessels. There are things that we could be holding on to that no longer give life, that are no longer a part of our worship, that Jesus has completely fulfilled. But we want to hold on to these old things, and then it actually hinders our relationship with God. And so we see this connection here where we have the same kind of thing where they built all this stuff, and they think this is how it has to be done so worship can happen. And I believe the reason why is because we have told ourselves that these are all the things we have to do to have success. If we're going to be successful as a church, here are the things we have to do. And I pose maybe our measure of success is wrong. Maybe we're thinking that we can only be successful if the church reaches 1,000 people, or if our church budget is $1 million. Right? This is what we have to be success, and there's a lot of people that teach that. But I think we forget that God can move just as mightily in a church of 100 as he can of 10,000. See, because God's power isn't found in numbers. It's found in his presence. That's where God's power is found. And then I have to ask, if we aren't feeling God's power, then maybe we need to look around to see, okay, well, what's hindering his presence? What is stopping God's presence to be here among us, to be in our daily lives? What are we allowing to get in the way of being in the presence of God consistently? Maybe it is our sin. Maybe there is some pride, or maybe we just have a false understanding of something that we need to seek the truth on. We don't know. Maybe just some practice that we're doing, that we're seeing that this is actually driving us further away from God. Or maybe we're missing something. Like this verse in 17, his disciples remembered that it is written, zeal for your house will consume me. And this is where, again, another question. Do we have zeal for the house of God? And when I say zeal, when we read this word, we don't mean I enjoy coming to church services. I enjoy listening to sermons. I enjoy the worship. Yes, we may like those things, but true zeal, the definition of the word, where you have great energy, enthusiasm, and passion. So much so that people think you're crazy. Think about it. When someone is so fanatic about something, people will be like, what a zealot, right? They use that as a term to the derogatory term. But for Christians, if we're considered a zealot for God, that's a great thing. Even listen to this, because they says they remembered that word, the zeal for the house it consumes me. This comes from Psalm chapter 69. Listen to this, starting verse 9. Because of your sake, I have borne reproach. Dishonor has covered my face. I have become estranged from my brothers and an alien to my mother's son. For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. Understand What David is saying here, he's like, because of my zeal for your house, my own family don't like me. And people reproach me, which the definition for reproach, it should be up here on the screen, to express disapproval, blame, or disappointment towards someone for their actions. That is reproach. Do people have reproach towards us because we have so much zeal for God, so much zeal for his church, that people look at us and they're just like, this guy's an idiot. This guy's way too zealous. Like, do we have that kind of zeal? And this does, like, to have this kind of zeal, it goes beyond what people have said. It goes beyond like playing church, like in the sense where we just show up once a week, get our hit of Jesus from our pastors or Jesus dealers, right? Like we just want a little bit of Jesus to get me through the week. But then the second we're out of these services, we go, and then the rest of our lives, like, no one can even tell if we're a Christian. We look exactly like the world. Like that's not zeal. That's just playing church. But when we're having zeal, like, if you try to be accused of taking Christianity too seriously, that's the kind of zeal we're talking about here. I mean, if someone's just like, you're taking Christianity way too far, that might be a good thing. Because you don't want the opposite end, where we're so soft on our Christianity and when we're so looking like the world, that people will say, well, they're a real Christian because they don't judge me. They're a real Christian because they just let me live my life. When really, in reality, this real Christian is too cowardly to flip some tables. Because that's what happens. This is what he's saying, like, the zeal for God and his house should consume us. It should consume us, our minds, our thoughts, our actions, everything about God and about his home. Like, we should just be full of so much zeal that even if we do something that the world or even maybe other Christians might be like, you're taking this too far. This is way too outrageous. Okay. We should be so consumed with God and his kingdom that, yes, in the world's eyes, we should be seen as outrageous people. The same way Jesus was seen as outrageous. But one big hindrance, I think, that hurts all of us to becoming this zealous for God and for his house and for his kingdom. Now I'm going to keep a little theme here going. Here's another meme. But this one's a little bit more serious. Maybe that's the problem. Some of us are sitting at tables we were sent to flip. And I think that's probably a big problem. And I just wonder, are we sitting at the table of idolatry? Because we have things in our life that we say nothing, not even God, will come before. Maybe it's our families, maybe it's our friends, maybe it's our jobs, maybe it's seeking more money. But we have these idols in our life that if God came in and said, hey, I need you to go across the country because I got a ministry for you over there, that we're going to be like, nah, I'm not doing that, God. I'm not leaving my family, or I'm not leaving my friends, or I'm not leaving this amazing job I have. You want me to do what, God? No. I'll do it right here. Do you want me to do it right here? Because I don't want to leave what I have. Or maybe we're sitting at the table of comfort. So any kind of teaching or anything we read from Scripture, we try to ignore, or maybe we even mock because we think it takes things too far, because we don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to be in situations that make us feel awkward. Or maybe this all ties up and we're just sitting at the table of pride because we think that we got life and we got Christianity figured out and our way of doing things and thoughts are right and everybody else is stupid for not seeing it. Maybe we're just so prideful. And that pride can lead us to treat people like trash. And so maybe this is where we have that problem. Or maybe we sit at the table of victimhood, believing that everything that has happened in our life is because of someone else or something else, some outside source. But we don't allow any kind of idea or thought into our mind that says, maybe some of this is a consequence of my own action. Maybe I need to change. Or maybe we sit at the table of tolerance because we refuse to confront sin in the lives of people that we say we love because, one, maybe we have a misunderstanding of what love is, but we just don't want to lose them. So we tolerate a lot. I can go on. Maybe you got something in your head that you're thinking, well, here's another table maybe we sit at as Christians. But what we need to know is that true zeal for God won't allow sin to set up shop in his house. It just won't allow it. If we're truly zealous for him and his house and for what he's doing and for his kingdom, we want to expand, we're not going to let sin get in. We're not going to let it set up. And it will try. Satan will try to get in. He will try to set up sin in the lives of people. He will try to get in here. He will. He's always trying. I mean, you've seen it probably within your own families, how Satan tries to come in and destroy your families at home. He's trying to get in, but we can't let it. And this is where some of the struggle comes, because for a lot of people, it's like, okay, well if this little bit might be okay, because that's how Satan works. That's how he starts to set up sin in the lives of people, in the lives of churches, is, okay, well, this little bit can't be that bad. Right? This little bit can't be that bad. And then the next thing you know, well, this little bit. And then we just keep going further until, we're in sin. He makes us think these little things aren't that bad or aren't that big, and then boom. So we got to realize, we can't be like these Pharisees that say, here's the line, here's how close you can get to it. All right, that's not how Christianity works. It's just knowing this is God's law, and you just avoid it. You just don't even go near it. And so zeal for our house must consume us. And I even say, even if other Christians are questioning what we're doing, maybe we're on the right track. Because I'll tell you one thing right now, the more zeal you have, the closer you get to God, just your daily life will be convicting to people. And when people are convicted, one of two things happen. Either they say, I need to learn from you, tell me how you got here, tell me how this happened, or they start accusing you of being sick. Or they start accusing you of taking scriptures way too seriously. Or they start accusing you of not being loving. Because they themselves don't want to be convicted by the way you live. So they want you to bring your standard down to meet theirs. So we must not even get anywhere near that. Continue having that zeal. So we continue in verse 18, John chapter 2. And this may sound familiar from all the stuff we just talked about. Jews then said to him, what sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things? Jesus answered them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, it took 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking about the temple of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered he said this, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had spoken. So here we have these Pharisees. They come in, they're just like, who is this guy? By what authority? Who do you think you are to do these things? But this isn't because they didn't know Jesus. They knew who Jesus was. He came up, he learned, he was a teacher, he's considered a rabbi. They knew who Jesus was, the person. That's why they're questioning him. Like, how dare you do these things? Who are you? What's your authority? And this is where Jesus not only takes care of the issue at hand, but he points to his ultimate work on the cross. And he's like, you want to know what my authority is? Destroy this temple and I'll raise it in 3 days. Talking about himself. He's like, you are going to destroy this temple, but in 3 days, I am going to raise it. And he's showing that where his authority is going to be through his death and resurrection. And that's where he's going to show that he has ultimate authority over all, over the people, over the world, over all religious systems, everything. Jesus has authority over all. And so even in this cleansing that he does, this cleansing of the temple, he shows the ultimate cleansing that he will do through his sacrifice on the cross and his victory over death. So he just takes his moment to be like, that's what it's all about. Because Jesus is like, I don't have to prove anything to you right now. You're going to see it later. And that's the ultimate cleansing that we all needed. And so as we wrap this story up, I want us to see John's final words on the story, because it often gets overlooked, but it ties everything together. Verse 23. Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover during the feast, many believed in his name, observing his signs which he was doing. But Jesus on his part was not entrusting himself to them, for he knew all men. And because he did not need anyone to testify concerning man, for he himself knew what was in man. And see, so people, after this, they're paying attention to Jesus, and they start seeing his very many signs. And John uses the word signs for miracles. And they're seeing this, and then we see something here that It's kind of hard to teach, and people don't like to talk about it because it's kind of hard to work through. But some different translations will say, even though they believed in Jesus, Jesus didn't believe in them. This is why he said he didn't trust himself to these people. Because Jesus knew their hearts. Jesus knew that they believed in him because they were just chasing miracles. They didn't want to actually follow him. And this is why when we see Jesus' parable, where he says there will be many on that day, on the day of judgment, that will come to him and say, Lord, did we not cast out many demons in your name? Did we not feed the poor? Did we not visit those in prisons? Did we not do all these amazing things in your name? And then I will look at them and tell them, depart from me, I never knew you. You see, because these people were chasing miracles. They were chasing their name to be great. They did all these things, but they didn't do them because they really knew God or knew Jesus or wanted to follow him. And they did this for their own selfish reasons. And this is why Jesus says, depart from me. See, because there's a difference between chasing miracles and following Jesus. Like chasing miracles would be coming to church to get something. Right, like saying, I need to go to church because I don't know what you need. But we just say that, that's where I need. Now, listen, that could be a starting point to get you in the door, but eventually we all got to grow in our relationship with God to the point where we realize we don't come to church just to get stuff. We come to church to serve. And that's where following Jesus comes in, because when we come in, it's listen, we walk in, we see opportunities to serve. Opportunities to help others. Opportunity to worship God. We come to church because we want to honor him. We want to honor him through our praise, through our singing. We want to honor him by the way we honor each other and we serve each other. We honor him by the way we take the gospel to whoever needs it. We honor him through our finance. We want to come to honor him with all that we are. That is true following of Jesus. And this following will make us be seen as outrageous people because of our zeal for him. And it make us do things that the world may be like, that's crazy. Why would you do that? But if we want to be like Jesus, remember, flipping tables and whipping some animals is in the realm of possibilities. He did it. He flipped the tables of the established religious order, was considered an outrageous person, but he did what needed to be done to make sure God's house remained undefiled so that anyone and everyone can come and truly worship him. And be in a place where they can worship him with all that they have. And there's no barriers. There's nothing human in the way so people can come to the throne of God. So if we want that for ourselves, we want that for others. I end with a question. Do we have enough zeal to be considered outrageous?